I always tell a story when I do these talks about there was a town built under a cliff. Town built under a cliff. And what does that mean? So there was a town that was built. Basically, there was a town in the New Mexico area where there's lots of cliffs and sharp corners. And there was one corner where the cars would go around, and it was a sharp corner. And on the corner was tell a story when I do these talks about there was a town built under a cliff. Town built under a cliff. And what does that mean? So there was a town that was built. Basically, there was a town in the New Mexico area where there's lots of cliffs and sharp corners. And there was one corner where the cars would go around, and it was a sharp corner, and on the corner was a cliff. And what would happen is the cars would go too fast, or they wouldn't negotiate the corner, and they would, you know, fall into the cliff, into the ravine, and blow up, and it was just horrible. And the town would send ambulances from the town, which is about 30 miles away. And by the time the ambulance would get there, the people would be dead. They couldn't help them, or they'd be so horrifically injured that they would die on the way to the hospital. So the town got together and said, we got to do something about this. And what they did is they decided to pass a tax, and they were going to build an ambulance corps in closer to the cliff, down lower. So when people did go over the edge, they could be there and be there quicker to help them. And they passed a law, they got taxed, they built this building there. And sure enough, certain ambulance drivers were put in there, and they waited. And when people came off the cliff, it was much better. They could get to them quicker. They were able to save some lives, but some of the lives were lost on the way to the hospital. It was a 30, 40-minute drive, and they needed to do something better than they were doing there. And they had a referendum, and the community agreed that they would pay their tax money to build a better triage center, somewhere where people could at least be stabilized before they transport them to the hospital. And they did so. And as they built this triage, it was getting a little larger, and they needed some people there to man it, and some staff and some people to do cleanup and infectious disease and other things. But they were able to save some lives because they could stabilize people before they would actually make it, have to get in the ambulance and go to the hospital. Well, that wasn't working as well as they were hoping. They were still losing people. And a referendum was passed by the community, and they made a decision to build a full-fledged hospital at the base of this cliff. And it made sense. That way they could help people, they could rehab them, get them stronger, get them better. And that's what they did. And as they built the hospital, they brought in nurses, and they brought in doctors, and there was administrative staff that had to be there, and there was people that took care of the building and maintenance, and at the same time. So these new people started working there, and they started buying lots and property close by. And some developers said, this is a great opportunity to put up some apartment buildings for all these nurses and these doctors that are here for this under this cliff. And so nurses have children, and children need school, and they brought a school in there, and they also had playgrounds, and they needed recreation, so they built up movie theaters, and of course they needed some stores for food, and they built several stores. Had come over, other businesses in the area saw the opportunity, and they came and built their own businesses there because they could see that this was a new upbuilding area there that people were moving into in order to help the people that are coming off this cliff. And a whole town gets built underneath this, supported by the injuries from people driving off the cliff. And somebody came along, I like to say a chiropractor, but probably not. And he looks over and he goes, why don't you put a fence up or a guardrail up along that cliff, and or alert people that there's a cliff and force them to slow down or something to stop it? Town was horrified. Well, that's misinformation. What do you mean? Walls don't work. They'll still go over it. They'll bust through it to get through it. Yeah, but it might help. Yeah, well, you know what? You're a kook. Get out of town. We don't want to hear about it. Everything is fine. We have, we're taking care of people. We don't need to do that. And then somebody else comes along and says, we need to figure out maybe we're diverting the road a different way so it doesn't turn so sharp up here. And then the eco not the ecologists in the area, that means we're going to have to plow into an area where there's this protected frog that lives up there in that one area, and he's a lone survivor. And if we divert the road, we can't. That frog's going to perish. So, are you okay with killing frogs or these beautiful little animals? That's what's going to happen if you divert the road. In other words, everybody fought it, and they never corrected the curve. They didn't put up a fence, and to this day, that town is still there, making money, surviving, building economy off of a cliff where people are perishing. Now, obviously, that's a fictitious story, but you know what? There's a lot of truth in that. You know it, and I know it. Medicine is big business. And I did a little research. I went on Chat GPT and I said, give me the top 10 most successful business models in America today. Top 10. Income, people being employed, and such. You know what number one was? Hospitals. Yeah, hospitals. Number one. Number two was toiletries and over-the-counter medications and things you would buy at the store on your own for health and for personal care. That's number two. Number three was the pharmacological big pharmacies. No, not big pharmacies, but big pharma. Pfizer, this drug industry is number three. You know what number four was? Health insurance, to make sure that you got the money to pay for all of the sickness and the drugs and all the toiletries, the things you need. That was the top four. I didn't go past that. So this town under a cliff is true, but that is a problem. All right. It's not the doctor's fault, I got you guys. The business of medicine has lost touch with what it really takes to help a patient get well. That is teaching and motivating, prevention and wellness. The Latin definition of doctor is teacher, not prescriber. Doctors are overworked, mostly underpaid, swimming in the fear of medical malpractice, the bureaucracy of insurance, Medicare, managed care, not to mention whenever you speak up against the government issued healthcare and government issued drugs, you will be definitely ostracized and pushed out of the system just by questioning it. For every new drug approved by the FDA, several drugs are taken off due to the harm they're causing. They're so inundated by sick people, they don't have the time or the chance to teach prevention or motivate wellness. Well,